What if I told you there was one night in American history when the Ku Klux Klan showed up to terrorize a community and ran for their lives? Not metaphorically, not eventually, but literally that same night, running through cornfields, diving into freezing ponds, abandoning their robes and their racist banners, and even the wife of their grand dragon. January 18th, 1958, 8:30 in the evening. A frozen cornfield near Hayes Pond, just outside Maxton, North Carolina. James W. Cole stood under a single light bulb, powered by a car battery. They called him Catfish Cole. He was the self-proclaimed Grand Dragon of the North Carolina Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Next to him, a 10-foot wooden cross burned red and orange against the dark winter sky. The flames crackled. The smell of kerosene hung in the cold air. 50 Klansmen surrounded him in their white robes and pointed hoods. They had driven up from South Carolina that afternoon. They were ready. They had their rifles. They had their hate. They had their plan to terrorize the Lumbee Indians who lived in Robeson County. Cole adjusted the microphone connected to his loudspeaker system. He was about to start his rally, about to tell his followers why segregation must be protected, why mixing races was destroying America, why the Lumbee people needed to be put in their place. He thought hundreds of white supporters would show up. He thought the Indians would cower in their homes like he believed they always did. He thought this would be another night of Klan dominance, another community broken by fear. He was wrong about everything. Listen carefully to what happened next, because they erased it from your history books for a reason. From the darkness beyond the cornfield, engines roared to life. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Headlights snapped on from every direction. Pickup trucks and old sedans surrounded the field in a massive circle. The Lumbee had arrived. Not 10 or 20, not 50, 500, maybe more. Nobody counted because everyone was moving. Car doors slammed. Boots hit frozen ground. Men poured out carrying hunting rifles and shotguns. Women stood on truck beds. Children watched from back seats. The Lumbee had come from every corner of Robeson County, from Pembroke, from Prospect, from Union Chapel and Fairgrove, and every small community in between. They started shouting, mocking the Klansmen, laughing at them. You could hear it echoing across the field. "Go home, Klansmen. You're not welcome here. This is our land." The sound built like a wave, 500 voices rising together. The Klansmen in their white robes looked at each other. They had expected fear. They were facing fury. Then came the shot. Bang! A single shotgun blast shattered the light bulb hanging over Catfish Cole's head. Glass exploded. The field went dark. Cole's loudspeaker went silent. More shots fired into the air. Not at people, just up. A message, a warning. We are armed. We are ready. And we are not afraid. Panic ripped through the Klan like wildfire. Klansmen scattered in every direction. Some ran into the woods surrounding the field. Some dove into Hayes Pond, splashing into water so cold it could stop your heart. Some tried to get to their cars, but the Lumbee blocked the roads. They left everything behind. Robes torn off and abandoned in the mud. The Klan banner still hanging from its pole, their burning cross still crackling. Even Catfish Cole's wife, whose car got stuck in a ditch. Lumbee men actually pushed her car out so she could escape. That is how little threat they posed. Within 15 minutes it was over. The Klan had been routed. Not a single person died that night. Not one. But something else died. The myth of Klan invincibility in Robeson County. A Lumbee man named Simeon Oxendine grabbed the Klan banner. He wrapped it around himself like a trophy. Photographers captured the image. It would make the cover of Life magazine. That photograph showed the world what happened when everyday people decided they had had enough. The Battle of Hayes Pond lasted less than an hour. The Ku Klux Klan never held another public rally in Robeson County. Not in 1959, not in 1969, not ever. But here is what they do not teach you in school. Here is what they buried in the footnotes of history. Here is what your children will never learn unless you tell them. This was not an accident. This was not luck. This was organized resistance. This was a community that refused to be terrorized. This was proof that when oppressed people unite, when they organize, when they show up in overwhelming numbers, they win. And that truth terrifies the people in power more than any weapon ever could. By the end of this video, you will understand 3 things that will change how you see resistance, how you see your own power, and how you see what is possible when we refuse to accept fear. First, you will know exactly how 500 Lumbee Native Americans organized in secret, mobilized in hours, and humiliated the most feared terrorist organization in American history without killing a single person. You will learn their tactics. You will understand their strategy. You will see the blueprint they left for us. Second, you will discover why this victory was systematically erased from history books, removed from civil rights curriculum, and buried under decades of silence. Not because it was unimportant, not because it was small, but because it proved something dangerous. It proved that organized self-defense works. It proved that armed communities can protect themselves. It proved that you do not have to wait for permission to resist. And third, you will connect this 1958 battle to the struggles happening right now in 2025. You will see how the tactics the Lumbee used mirror what communities across America are doing today. You will understand why this story matters more now than ever before. This is not ancient history. Your parents were alive when this happened. Your grandparents might have seen it on the news. This was 67 years ago. That is within living memory. That is recent enough that we should all know these names. Simeon Oxendine, Charlie Wariax, James W. Catfish Cole. These names should be as familiar as Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., but they are not. And that is not an accident. The Lumbee people are not black. They are Native American, the largest tribe east of the Mississippi River. But their fight was our fight. Their enemy was our enemy. White supremacy terrorized them the same way it terrorized black communities. They faced the same segregation, the same discrimination, the same violence. And when the Klan came for them, they understood something that too many of us have forgotten. Your enemy's enemy is your friend. People of color must stand together. Brown and black and red united against white supremacy. That solidarity is what won at Hayes Pond. That solidarity is what terrifies the system today. That solidarity is what they have spent decades trying to erase from our collective memory. After you watch this video, you will never see modern self-defense movements the same way again. When you hear about community defense, when you hear about armed protection of protests, when you hear people say, "We need to organize and protect our neighborhoods," you will remember Hayes Pond. You will remember that our elders already showed us how. They did not wait for the government to protect them. The sheriff had literally driven to South Carolina to beg the Klan not to come, and the Klan laughed in his face. The government was not going to help. It never does until we force it to. So the Lumbee protected themselves. They used their Second Amendment rights. They carried legal firearms. They organized their community. They showed up in numbers too large to be ignored or defeated. And they won. Not in a year, not in a decade. That night. One community. One victory that changed everything. You need to know this story because they are counting on you not knowing it. They are counting on you believing that resistance is futile, that organizing is too hard, that standing up to terror will get you killed. Hayes Pond proves all of that is a lie. And once you know the truth, you can never unknow it. Once you see what is possible, you can never unsee it. once you understand that your ancestors, your allies, your people already won battles like this, you can never go back to believing you are powerless. So let's go back to Robeson County. Let's go back to January 1958. Let's understand who these people were, what they faced, why they fought, and how they won. Because this is your inheritance. This is your history. This is your proof that we have always been warriors. To understand what happened at Hayes Pond, you need to understand Robeson County, North Carolina in 1958. This was not a place where people had choices. This was not a place where the law protected everyone equally. This was Jim Crow at its peak. This was segregation enforced with terror. Robeson County sat in the southeastern corner of North Carolina, rural and poor. Cotton fields and tobacco farms stretched for miles. Small towns dotted the landscape. Pembroke, Maxton, Lumberton, Red Springs. Most people worked the land, or worked in the few factories that existed. But here is what made Robeson County different from almost anywhere else in the South. It was triracial. About 30,000 Lumbee Indians lived there, a significant black population, and a white minority that controlled everything. Picture this. 3 water fountains outside the courthouse. One labeled white, one labeled colored, one labeled Indian. 3 separate school systems, 3 separate hospitals, 3 separate worlds existing in the same county, all of them unequal. The Lumbee people had been there for centuries. They were the largest Native American tribe east of the Mississippi River. They had survived colonization. They had survived disease. They had survived attempts to remove them from their land. They spoke English. Many were Christian. They farmed. They built churches and schools. They were not the Hollywood version of Native Americans. They were people trying to survive in a system designed to crush them. In 1956, just 2 years before Hayes Pond, the federal government finally gave them official recognition as a tribe. Finally, after decades of fighting for acknowledgement. But recognition on paper did not change their daily lives. They still could not vote freely. They still faced discrimination everywhere they went. They still watched their children attend underfunded schools and falling apart buildings. And they knew exactly who kept it that way. The same people who kept black folks down. The same system of white supremacy. The same terrorists in white robes. Many Lumbee men were veterans. They had fought in World War II. They had fought in Korea. They had put on United States military uniforms and gone overseas to fight for freedom. Then they came home to a country that treated them like third-class citizens. That kind of experience changes a man. You cannot ask someone to die for democracy abroad and then expect them to accept oppression at home without consequence. So when the Klan came to Robeson County in January 1958, they were not dealing with people who had never seen violence. They were not dealing with people who did not know how to organize. They were not dealing with people who believed the system would save them. They were dealing with veterans, farmers, fathers, and mothers who had already decided they would not live in fear. Now let me tell you about the man who thought he could terrorize them. James W. Cole. Everyone called him Catfish. Nobody remembers why. Maybe it was his appearance. Maybe it was his personality. Does not matter. What matters is what he represented. Cole was the Grand Dragon of the North Carolina Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. He had started his own Klan organization in 1956 after the Supreme Court ruled in Brown v. Board of Education that school segregation was unconstitutional. Cole saw that ruling as a declaration of war against white supremacy. He decided he would fight back. He held rallies across North Carolina. He recruited members. He preached segregation like it was gospel. He burned crosses. He threatened families. He believed he was protecting America from what he called mongrelization. That was his word. Mongrelization. The mixing of races. In his mind, the Lumbee Indians were exactly that. Mixed. Impure. Half-breeds. He used that slur openly. He told his followers there were 30,000 half-breeds in Robeson County, and they needed to be taught a lesson. In January 1958, Cole launched a terror campaign. First, he burned a cross in front of a Native American woman's house in St. Paul's, North Carolina. Her crime. She was dating a white man. Cole wanted to send a message. Stay with your own kind, or we will come for you. A few days later, another cross burning. This time in front of an Indian family's home in Lumberton. They had just moved into what Cole considered a white neighborhood. Same message. Know your place. Klan members drove through Lumbee communities in Robeson County, with loudspeakers blaring. Come hear why I believe in segregation. Come learn why race mixing is destroying America. They waved Confederate flags. They shouted slurs. They wanted fear. But they got anger instead. Cole announced his big rally for January 18, 1958. He rented a field near Hayes Pond, on the outskirts of Maxton. He printed flyers. He contacted the press. He wanted this to be public. He wanted the Lumbee to see the Klan's strength. He wanted them to know that white supremacy was in charge, and nothing they could do would change that. The sheriff of Robeson County, Malcolm McLeod, was terrified. Not of the Klan, of what the Lumbee might do. He knew these people. He knew they were not going to sit quietly in their homes while the Klan rallied on their land. So Sheriff McLeod drove all the way to South Carolina where Cole lived. He went to Cole's house. He begged him to cancel the rally. Cancel it, McLeod said. You are going to start something you cannot control. Cole refused. He laughed at the sheriff. Sounds like you do not know how to handle your people, Cole said. We will come show you how. That was his fatal mistake. He assumed the Lumbee were like other communities the Klan had terrorized. He assumed they would hide. He assumed fear was universal. He assumed wrong. Word of the rally spread through the Lumbee community like lightning. People heard it on the radio. They saw it in the newspaper. They talked about it in churches and barbershops and diners. The Klan is coming. The Klan is holding a rally on our land. The Klan thinks they can terrorize us. The response was not fear. It was fury. At a barbershop in Pembroke, men gathered. Somebody said, "We should go to Maxton. We should confront them. We should not let them bring this to our homes." Everyone agreed. At the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Hall Lumbee veterans who had fought in World War II and Korea held their own meeting. These were men who had faced enemy fire in Europe and Asia. These were men who had stormed beaches and cleared bunkers and survived hell. A bunch of Klansmen in bed sheets did not scare them. They discussed tactics, not violence for the sake of violence. Strategy, if we surround them, if we outnumber them, if we show them we are armed and ready, they will back down. Bullies always do when you stand up to them. The plan spread by word of mouth. No official leader called the shots. No organization sent out orders. This was community organizing at its purest. Neighbor telling neighbor. Family telling family. Friend telling friend. If you care about our people, be at Hayes Pond on Saturday night. Men went to the hardware store in Pembroke and bought every box of shotgun shells on the shelf. Every single box. The store owner knew what was happening. He did not stop them. Some brought hunting rifles. Some brought shotguns. Some brought pistols. These were legal firearms. Farmers and hunters owned guns. This was rural North Carolina. Guns were tools. And on January 18, 1958, they became instruments of resistance. But not everyone who showed up was armed. Many came just to stand in solidarity, to be counted, to add their body to the numbers, because they understood that mass presence is its own form of power. January 18th arrived. Cold, clear. The sun set early like it does in winter. Darkness came fast. At 8:00 p.m., James Catfish Cole and 50 Klansmen arrived at the cornfield near Hayes Pond. They had driven up from South Carolina. Most of them were not even from North Carolina. They were out-of-state agitators coming to terrorize people they had never met. They erected a 10-foot cross in the middle of the field. They soaked it in kerosene. They lit it on fire. Flames shot up into the night sky, orange and red and crackling. They hung a single light bulb from a wooden pole and powered it with a car battery. That light was supposed to illuminate Cole while he gave his speech. They set up a loudspeaker system so his voice could carry across the field. They wanted everyone in the area to hear his hate. They wore their white robes and hoods. Some carried rifles. They thought they looked intimidating. They thought they looked powerful. A few reporters showed up. The press had been notified. This was supposed to be a big event, a show of Klan strength. Cole wanted media coverage. He wanted his message broadcast. North Carolina Highway Patrol officers were there too. Just a few. They were not there to stop the rally. They were there to observe, to keep the peace, they said. But everyone knew what that meant. They were not going to protect the Lumbee. They never did. At 8:15 p.m., Cole was about to start speaking. That is when the Lumbee arrived. First you heard the engines, low rumbling in the distance, then louder. Dozens of vehicles, pickup trucks with wooden beds and rusted fenders, old sedans held together with wire and prayer, farm trucks that smelled like tobacco and dirt. They came from every direction. North, south, east, west. They surrounded the cornfield in a massive circle. Headlights flicked on, high beams blazing. The field that had been lit by one dim bulb was now flooded with light from hundreds of cars. Doors opened. Men climbed out. Women stood on truck beds. Children watched from windows. Everyone was there. Young men barely out of high school. Old men who remembered when their grandfathers told stories of resistance. Veterans still strong. Farmers with hands rough from work, and they were armed. Rifles slung over shoulders, shotguns held across chests, pistols tucked into belts. Not pointed at anyone yet, just visible, just present, just undeniable. The Lumbee started shouting, not in fear, in defiance, in mockery. "Go home, Klansmen. You are not welcome here. This is our land." The sound built. 500 voices, maybe more. A wall of noise that drowned out everything else. Some Lumbee walked closer to the Klan's burning cross, close enough to see the Klansmen's faces under their hoods, close enough to see the fear starting to creep into their eyes. This was not how it was supposed to go. This was not the script. The Indians were supposed to be hiding. They were supposed to be afraid. Instead, they were laughing, mocking, taunting. One Lumbee man yelled, "Take off those hoods. Let us see your faces. Show us who you really are." The tension thickened, both sides staring at each other. The Klan outnumbered 10 to 1, maybe more. Cole looked around. His rally was ruined. His audience never showed up. Instead of hundreds of white supporters, he got 500 angry Lumbee. Then came the shot. Bang! A single shotgun blast echoed across the field. The light bulb hanging over Cole's head exploded. Shards of glass rained down. The field went dark except for the burning cross and the car headlights. Nobody knows who fired that shot. Nobody ever claimed it. Maybe it does not matter. What matters is what it meant. We are armed. We are ready. And your little light show is over. More shots fired into the air. Not at people. Nobody was trying to kill anyone. But the message was clear. You are outgunned. You are outnumbered. And if you want a fight, we will give you one. That is when the Klan broke. Panic spread through their ranks like wildfire. Klansmen ripped off their robes so they could run faster. White fabric dropped in the mud and was trampled. Some sprinted toward the woods at the edge of the field. Branches whipped their faces as they crashed through the darkness. Some ran toward Hayes Pond. It was January. The water was freezing, but terror makes you do irrational things. They splashed into the pond. Some waded up to their waists before realizing how cold it was. Hypothermia could kill you in water that cold. But in that moment, drowning seemed better than facing the Lumbee. Some Klansmen tried to get back to their cars, but Lumbee vehicles blocked the dirt roads leading out. They were trapped. They begged to be let through. Please, please just let us leave. Let us go home. The Lumbee let them go, not because they felt sorry for them, but because they had already won. There was no point in more violence. The Klan was defeated. Everyone could see it. In the chaos, the Klan left everything behind. Their banner, a large piece of fabric emblazoned with Ku Klux Klan, and a blood-drop cross still hung from its pole. Their burning cross still crackled. Their robes littered the ground like discarded ghosts. And then there was the moment that became legend. Catfish, Cole's wife, had driven to the rally in a separate car. When the panic started, she tried to flee. But her car got stuck in a ditch on the side of the road, wheels spinning in mud, engine revving, going nowhere. Lumbee men walked over. She must have thought they were going to hurt her. She must have been terrified. But they did not touch her. They pushed her car out of the ditch. They freed her. They let her drive away. Because the Lumbee were not there to harm women. They were there to defeat terrorists. And they had. By 8:50 p.m., it was over. Less than an hour after it started. A Lumbee man named Simeon Oxendine grabbed the Klan's banner. He was a World War II veteran. He had fought Nazis in Europe. Now, he had fought the Klan in North Carolina. He wrapped the banner around his shoulders like a cape. He smiled. Photographers captured the image. Another Lumbee man, Charlie Wariax, held the banner up high. Other Lumbee gathered around. They were not posing for history. They were claiming victory. They were saying, "This is ours now. Your symbols mean nothing. Your terror ends here." That photograph made the cover of Life magazine, one of the biggest publications in America. Millions of people saw it. The image of Simeon Oxendine wrapped in the Klan banner became iconic. It showed the world something they rarely got to see. Oppressed people winning. Law enforcement arrived late, after everything was over. They arrested a few people, some Lumbee for discharging firearms, some Klansmen for inciting a riot. But the charges barely mattered. Everyone knew who won. James Catfish Cole was arrested. He was convicted of inciting a riot. He was sentenced to 18 months to 2 years in prison. When he got out, his Klan organization was in shambles. Nobody wanted to join a group that had been humiliated by Indians in a cornfield. The North Carolina Knights of the Ku Klux Klan never recovered. The Lumbee went home that night as heroes. The next morning, newspapers across the state ran the story. Indians rout Klan. Lumbee defeat KKK. Klansmen flee in panic. The New York Times picked it up. The Washington Post. International papers in Europe covered it. For a brief moment, the world saw what happened when a community refused to be terrorized. For a brief moment, the Lumbee were celebrated. For a brief moment, it seemed like this victory would be remembered forever. But then the silence came. The erasure. The burial. And that brings us to the most important question. If this was such a huge victory, if this humiliated the Klan, if this made international news, why do you not know about it? Why did they not teach you in school? Why is Hayes Pond a footnote instead of a chapter? Because the people in power realized something terrifying. If everyone knew about Hayes Pond, they might get ideas. They might realize that organizing works. They might realize that armed self-defense can protect communities. They might realize that you do not need to wait for the government to save you. You can save yourself. And that realization would change everything. But before we dive into how they buried this story, you need to understand something crucial. Hayes Pond was not alone. This was not the only time people of color stood up to the Klan with force. This was not the only victory that got erased. There was a pattern, a strategy, a coordinated effort to make you forget that resistance works. And when you see the full pattern, when you connect all the dots, you will understand exactly why they don't want you to know these stories. Hayes Pond was not a fluke. It was not luck. It was not one isolated moment of courage that happened by accident. It was part of something bigger, a pattern of armed resistance that stretched across the South, a tradition of self-defense that terrified white supremacists and embarrassed the government. They want you to think the civil rights movement was only about peaceful marches and turning the other cheek. They want you to believe that black and brown people sat quietly and waited for white people to grant them rights. They want you to think violence was only committed by racists, never resisted by the oppressed. That is a lie. A strategic lie designed to keep you passive, designed to make you think fighting back is wrong, designed to convince you that the only moral response to terrorism is nonviolence. But your ancestors knew better. They knew that sometimes you have to defend yourself. They knew that sometimes the only language bullies understand is force. They knew that turning the other cheek works great in church, but gets you killed in the streets. So let me show you the pattern. Let me show you what happened before Hayes Pond, during the same era as Hayes Pond, and after Hayes Pond. Let me show you that organized armed self-defense was not rare, it was common. And it worked. 1 year before the Lumbee routed the Klan at Hayes Pond, something similar happened just a few hours away. Monroe, North Carolina. Union County, 1957. A man named Robert F. Williams changed everything. Robert Williams was the president of the Monroe chapter of the NAACP. He was not the kind of civil rights leader you see in textbooks. He was not preaching nonviolence. He was not asking white people to please be nicer. He was a Marine Corps veteran. He had served his country. He came home to a place where black people were still being lynched with impunity. In Monroe, the Klan was active and violent. They would drive through black neighborhoods at night in convoys of cars, shooting guns into the air, throwing bottles, screaming threats. They wanted black folks to know they could be attacked at any moment. They wanted constant fear. Robert Williams had a different idea. He organized armed self-defense. He and about 50 other black men, many of them veterans, armed themselves legally. They had rifles, they had shotguns, they had pistols, all legal, all registered, all constitutional. When the Klan came through Monroe one night in 1957, Williams and his men were ready. They stood at the entrance to the black neighborhood. Armed, visible, defiant. The Klan convoy slowed, saw the armed men, saw they were outnumbered, and turned around. There was a brief exchange of gunfire. Nobody died, but the Klan left, and they never came back. Not to that neighborhood. Not while Robert Williams was there. Williams said something that got him in massive trouble with the mainstream civil rights leadership. He said, "We must meet violence with violence." He said armed self-defense was not only justified, it was necessary. He said the Second Amendment applied to black people too. The NAACP national office suspended him for those comments. They said he was too radical, too violent, too dangerous. But the people in Monroe knew the truth. Robert Williams kept them safe when nobody else would. Eventually, the FBI came after him. They trumped up charges. They tried to arrest him. Williams fled to Cuba, then to China. He lived in exile for years. And while he was gone, they erased him from the history books. They removed him from the civil rights narrative. They made sure you would never learn his name. Why? Because Robert Williams proved that armed resistance works. And that is a dangerous thing for oppressed people to know. Now move forward to 1964. Louisiana and Mississippi. The heart of the Deep South. The height of the civil rights struggle. freedom riders getting beaten, churches getting bombed, activists getting murdered. The Klan and local police working together to terrorize anyone fighting for equality. Into this, hell stepped a group called the Deacons for Defense and Justice. Black men, most of them veterans, most of them working class, who decided enough was enough. They formed armed patrols to protect civil rights workers. They guarded marches. They stood watch outside black churches and homes. They made it clear that if the Klan attacked, they would get shot. And it worked. The Deacons prevented multiple bombings. They stopped several attempted murders. They saved lives. Real lives. People who would have been killed if the Deacons had not been there armed and ready. There is one story that captures their impact perfectly. In Bogalusa, Louisiana, the Klan planned to bomb a black church during a mass meeting. The Deacons got word of the plot. They set up a perimeter around the church. They had men stationed on rooftops with rifles. They had others patrolling the streets. When the Klansmen showed up and saw the defense, they left. The bombing never happened. Nobody died. That happened over and over again. The Deacons for Defense operated in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama from 1964 to 1968. They had hundreds of members. They saved countless lives. And you probably never heard of them. Why? Because mainstream civil rights history focuses on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and nonviolence. The Deacons do not fit that narrative, so they get erased, footnoted, ignored, as if they never existed. But they did exist, and the people they protected remember. And now you know too. Then came 1966, Oakland, California. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. You might have heard of them. But what you heard was probably wrong. The media portrayed them as violent thugs, dangerous extremists, black militants who hated white people and wanted revolution. Here is what they actually did. They started cop watch patrols. They would follow police cars through black neighborhoods with cameras and law books and legally owned firearms. California law at the time allowed open carry, so the Panthers carried rifles openly. They would observe police stops. They would remind black people of their rights. They would document police brutality, and it worked. Police violence in Oakland dropped when the Panthers were watching. Cops could not beat people when armed Panthers were standing 15 feet away with cameras rolling. But the Panthers did more than police accountability. They started free breakfast programs for children. They opened health clinics in underserved neighborhoods. They created schools. They provided services the government refused to provide. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover declared the Black Panthers the greatest threat to national security. Not the Klan, not neo-Nazis, not actual terrorists. The Black Panthers. Why? Because they were organizing poor black people. Because they were feeding children, because they were teaching self-defense. The FBI launched COINTELPRO, a counterintelligence program designed to destroy the Panthers. They infiltrated the organization. They spread lies. They framed leaders for crimes they did not commit. They assassinated Fred Hampton, a 21-year-old Panther leader, while he slept in his bed in Chicago in 1969. And then they erased the good the Panthers did. They made sure history remembered guns and berets, but forgot breakfast programs and health clinics. They made sure you thought of the Panthers as violent criminals instead of community organizers. Do you see the pattern? Now, do you see what they do? Every single time, people of color organize armed resistance. Robert F. Williams in Monroe, driven into exile, erased from history. Deacons for Defense in Louisiana and Mississippi, forgotten, left out of textbooks. Black Panthers in Oakland, vilified, destroyed, misrepresented. Lumbee at Hayes Pond, turned into a funny anecdote instead of a victory. Every single time the story gets buried. Every single time the leaders get arrested, exiled, or killed. Every single time the history gets rewritten, to remove the parts about armed self-defense. Why? What are they so afraid of? What is so dangerous about you knowing these stories? I will tell you exactly what they fear. They fear you realizing that you have power. They fear you organizing with your neighbors. They fear you understanding that the Second Amendment applies to you too. They fear you knowing that when communities unite and defend themselves, they win. Because if you know that you might do it, if you know Hayes Pond succeeded, you might organize your own community defense. If you know Robert Williams beat back the Klan, you might arm yourself legally. If you know the Deacons saved lives, you might form patrols in your neighborhood. If you know the Panthers fed children and policed the police, you might start your own programs. And that terrifies them. A passive, fearful, isolated population is easy to control. An organized, empowered, united population is not. So they hide these stories. They erase these names. They rewrite this history. They teach you that nonviolence is the only moral option. They teach you to wait, to ask nicely, to hope that your oppressors wake up one day and decide to be fair. But that is not how change happens. That is not how the Lumbee won at Hayes Pond. That is not how Robert Williams protected Monroe. That is not how the Deacons saved lives. That is not how the Panthers fed children. Change happens when people organize, when they arm themselves legally, when they show up in numbers too large to ignore, when they say no more, when they defend their communities because nobody else will. That is the pattern they tried to bury. That is the truth they do not want you to know. That is the legacy they erased from your textbooks. But you know now. You cannot unknow it. You cannot unhear these names. You cannot forget that Hayes Pond happened, that it worked, that nobody died, that 500 everyday people stood up to 50 terrorists and won. And now the question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Are you going to let them keep erasing this history? Are you going to let your children grow up thinking resistance is futile? Or are you going to tell these stories? Are you going to remember these names? Are you going to pass this legacy down? Because the only way they win is if we forget. The only way they keep us powerless is if we believe we are powerless. The only way they maintain control is if we never realize what our ancestors already proved. That when we organize, when we unite, when we defend ourselves, we are unstoppable. That is the pattern. That is the truth. And that is why they tried so hard to bury it. But it is time to dig it up. It is time to remember. It is time to reclaim this history and use it to build our future. Because Hayes Pond wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And the story isn't over yet. So if Hayes Pond was such a massive victory, if it made the cover of Life magazine, if it was international news in 1958, why are you just hearing about it now? Why did your teachers never mention it? Why is it not in the civil rights curriculum alongside Rosa Parks and the March on Washington? Let me tell you exactly how they buried this story. Let me show you the mechanisms of erasure. Because once you understand how they hide history, you will start seeing it everywhere. You will start noticing all the other stories they erased, all the other victories they buried, all the other proof of our power that they tried to destroy. The first method is the simplest. They just do not include it. Textbook omission. If you look at the standard American history textbooks used in high schools across this country, Hayes Pond is not there. It is not in the chapter on the civil rights movement. It is not in the section on the 1950s. It is not mentioned at all. The timeline they teach goes like this. Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. Little Rock 9 in 1957. Sit-ins begin in 1960. Freedom rides in 1961. March on Washington in 1963. Civil Rights Act in 1964. Selma and Voting Rights Act in 1965. That is the story. Peaceful resistance leading to legislative victories. Hayes Pond happened in January 1958, right between Little Rock and the sit-ins, right in the middle of this timeline. But it is not there. Why? Because it does not fit the narrative they want to teach. It does not fit the idea that change only comes through non-violence and patience. It proves that armed self-defense worked, and they cannot have you knowing that. The same thing happened to Robert F. Williams, to the Deacons for Defense, to the armed protection the Black Panthers provided. All of it erased or minimized. All of it left, out of the mainstream story. Not because it was unimportant, but because it was too important, too dangerous, too empowering. Think about what you learned in school about the civil rights movement. You learned about Dr. King's dream. You learned about peaceful marches. You learned about sitting at lunch counters and not fighting back when people spit on you and poured drinks on your head. You learned that dignity comes from non-retaliation. That moral victory comes from suffering peacefully, and there is truth in that. Non-violent resistance did achieve real victories. Dr. King was a brilliant strategist and a moral leader. But that is not the whole story. It is not even half the story. It is the sanitized version, designed to keep you passive. They do not teach you that Dr. King kept guns in his house for protection. They do not teach you that his home was guarded by armed men after it was bombed. They do not teach you that armed deacons protected the marchers in Selma. They do not teach you that Robert Williams was operating at the same time as Dr. King, using different tactics that also worked. They teach you the parts that make you wait for change. They hide the parts that show you how to take it. The second method of erasure is language manipulation. When they cannot completely hide an event, they change what they call it. They change the framing. They change the meaning. For decades, Hayes Pond was called the Maxton riot when it was mentioned at all. Riot. That word has negative connotations. It suggests chaos, lawlessness, violence without purpose. It puts the Lumbee in the wrong. But Hayes Pond was not a riot. It was a battle. It was organized resistance. It was self-defense. It was a victory. Those words mean something very different. Those words give credit to the Lumbee for strategy and courage. Those words make them heroes instead of criminals. You see the same tactic with Tulsa in 1921. For 75 years, it was called the Tulsa Race Riot. Riot implies both sides were equally violent. Riot suggests black people were partly to blame. But what happened in Tulsa was not a riot. It was a massacre. It was genocide. It was white terrorism that murdered 300 black people and destroyed 35 city blocks of black wealth. It took until the 1990s for historians to start calling it the Tulsa Race Massacre. And even then, it took years for textbooks to change. Some still have not. Language matters. What you call something shapes how people think about it. If you call Hayes Pond a riot, it sounds bad. If you call it a victory, it sounds inspiring. They chose riot on purpose, just like they chose riot for Watts in 1965. Just like they chose riot for Detroit in 1967. Anytime black and brown people fought back, it was called a riot. Anytime white people attacked, it was called an incident or a disturbance, or sometimes not called anything at all. The third method is focus shift. When they cannot completely erase Hayes Pond, and they cannot fully control the language, they change what parts of the story get emphasized. They turn a victory into a joke. When Hayes Pond is mentioned today, what do you hear? You hear that the Klansmen ran into the woods. You hear that they jumped into a freezing pond. You hear that they left the Grand Dragon's wife behind, and Lumbee men had to push her car out of a ditch. You hear that the Klan ran away in their underwear after ripping off their robes. All of that is true. It happened. But when that is the only part of the story you tell, it becomes comedy. It becomes a funny anecdote. It becomes a feel-good moment. And that takes away the political and military significance. Hayes Pond was not just funny. It was strategic. It was organized. It was a calculated show of force that worked perfectly. 500 people mobilized in hours. They surrounded the enemy. They fired warning shots. They routed their opponents without killing anyone. That is not comedy. That is tactical brilliance. But they do not want you thinking about the tactics. They do not want you studying the strategy. They do not want you learning the lessons. So they focus on the funny parts and skip over the empowering parts. They let you laugh and then they move on. And you never realize what you just witnessed. You never understand that Hayes Pond is a blueprint you could use today. The fourth method is media suppression over time. In 1958, Hayes Pond got massive coverage. Life magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post. People across America saw Simeon Oxendine wrapped in that Klan banner. For a moment, the Lumbee were national heroes. But media coverage is temporary. Newspapers from 1958 get thrown away. Magazines from 1958 end up in attics and basements. Unless the story gets retold, unless it gets included in books and documentaries and school curriculum, it fades. People forget. New generations never learn it happened. And Hayes Pond was never retold. Not in the 1960s when civil rights documentaries were being made. Not in the 1970s when Black history started being taught in schools. Not in the 1980s or 1990s. It just vanished from the national conversation. Why? Because by the 1960s, the FBI was hunting armed resistance movements. J. Edgar Hoover had launched COINTELPRO to destroy the Black Panthers and any other group that advocated self-defense. The government did not want stories like Hayes Pond inspiring people. They did not want you knowing that armed communities could defeat the Klan. So Hayes Pond was allowed to fade. No documentaries, no movies, no TV specials. Compare that to Selma, which has been made into multiple films. Compare that to the Freedom Riders, who have been featured in countless documentaries. Those stories get retold because they fit the narrative of non-violent resistance. Hayes Pond does not. So it gets forgotten. Even today in 2025, if you search for Hayes Pond online, you will find some information. Wikipedia has an article. There are a few blog posts. Some local North Carolina historians have written about it. But it is not mainstream knowledge. It is not common knowledge. Most Americans, even most people passionate about civil rights history, have never heard of it. And that is not an accident. That is deliberate. That is the result of decades of choosing not to teach it, not to film it, not to celebrate it, not to remember it. Now let me show you what they do teach. Let me show you the contrast, because when you see what gets included and what gets excluded, the pattern becomes undeniable. They teach Rosa Parks. And they should. Rosa Parks was brave. She was an organizer. She was important. But they teach a sanitized version. They teach that she was a tired seamstress who did not want to give up her seat. They make it sound spontaneous. They make her sound passive. They do not teach that Rosa Parks was a trained activist, that she had attended organizing workshops at the Highlander Folk School, that she was the secretary of the local NAACP chapter, that her act of defiance was planned and strategic. They do not teach the organizing genius behind the moment. They teach the fairy tale version because it is less threatening. They teach Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. And they should. It is one of the greatest speeches in American history, but they only teach the dream part, the hopeful part, the part about little black children and little white children holding hands. They do not teach the rest of that speech where King talked about the fierce urgency of now, where he said America has given the Negro people a bad check, where he warned that there would be no peace until justice was achieved. They definitely do not teach his later speeches where he connected racism to militarism and capitalism. They teach the dream and ignore the demand. They teach the Freedom Riders, young people riding buses into the Deep South to challenge segregation, getting beaten, getting arrested, staying nonviolent even when attacked. It is a powerful story. It is worth teaching. But they do not teach that many of those Freedom Riders were protected by armed black men in local communities. They do not teach that the Deacons for Defense guarded some of those rides. They do not teach that nonviolence worked, partly because armed offenders made sure the violence did not escalate to murder. Do you see the pattern? They teach the nonviolent parts. They hide the armed resistance parts. They teach the waiting. They hide the taking. They teach the peaceful. They hide the powerful. And the purpose is clear. They want you passive. They want you patient. They want you believing that change only comes when you ask nicely and wait for those in power to decide to be fair. They want you thinking that fighting back is always wrong, that defending yourself is immoral, that weapons are only for the oppressor, never for the oppressed. But Hayes Pond proves all of that is a lie. The Lumbee fought back. They won. Nobody died. And for one night in 1958, the world saw what happens when everyday people refuse to be terrorized, when they organize, when they arm themselves legally, when they say no. That is the story they tried to erase. That is the truth they buried under decades of silence and distortion. That is the lesson they do not want you learning. But you know it now. You cannot unknow it. And that changes everything. Hayes Pond is not ancient history. It is not irrelevant. It is not some quaint story from a different time that has no bearing on today. Hayes Pond is a blueprint for right now, for 2025, for the struggles we are facing this very moment. Because here is the truth they do not want you to see. White supremacy did not die. It evolved. The Klan took off their hoods, but they did not disappear. The tactics changed, but the terror remains. And that means the lessons of Hayes Pond are more relevant now than ever. Let me show you the connections. Let me show you how 1958 mirrors 2025. Let me show you why this story matters to your life today. First, understand what the Lumbee did at Hayes Pond. They organized their community in hours. They showed up in overwhelming numbers. They used legal firearms. They confronted terror directly. They made it clear that their community would not be a soft target. And they won without bloodshed. That is the blueprint. Community organization. Mass mobilization. Legal armed self-defense. Direct confrontation. Victory without unnecessary violence. Every single piece of that strategy is legal today. Every single piece is applicable to modern struggles. Look at what is happening right now across America. Far-right groups are still marching. Proud Boys, Patriot Front, Boogaloo Boa. They show up at protests. They intimidate communities of color. They threaten school board members and election workers. They carry weapons openly to make people afraid. In Charlottesville, Virginia, in 2017, neo-Nazis and white supremacists held a Unite the Right rally. They marched with torches chanting, "Jews will not replace us." They attacked counter-protesters. One of them drove a car into a crowd and murdered a woman named Heather Heyer. That was 8 years ago, not 1958, 2017. On January 6, 2021, a mob of insurrectionists stormed the United States Capitol. Among them were Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, 3%ers. They carried Confederate flags through the halls of Congress. They hunted for legislators. They built a gallows outside. That was less than 5 years ago. In school board meetings across the country in 2022 and 2023 and 2024, organized far-right groups showed up to ban books about Black history and Native history. They shouted down parents. They threatened educators. They demanded that the truth about racism be erased from curriculum. Does any of this sound familiar? Organized groups showing up to intimidate, using symbols of hate, trying to control what history gets taught, trying to make communities afraid. It is the same playbook, different uniforms, same hate, and the response has been the same too. Too often people stay home. They stay quiet. They hope someone else will handle it. They trust that the system will protect them. And then they are shocked when the system does not. When the fascists win. When the books get banned. When the monuments to racism stay standing. But some communities have remembered the lessons of Hayes Pond, even if they never heard the name. When the Proud Boys announced a rally in Portland, Oregon, community members organized counter-protests in numbers that dwarfed the fascists. When white supremacists tried to march in Boston, thousands of Bostonians showed up to shut it down. When neo-Nazis planned events in cities across America, locals organized to make them unwelcome. The tactic works. Overwhelming numbers, community solidarity, direct confrontation. The same things that worked at Hayes Pond work now. Because bullies are still bullies. And bullies back down when they realize they are outnumbered and outmatched. Now let us talk about the solidarity piece. The Lumbee were not black, but they understood that the Klan was everyone's enemy. They understood that people of color must stand together. Brown and black and red united against white supremacy. That solidarity is more important now than ever, because they are still trying to divide us. They want Black Americans and Latino immigrants fighting over jobs. They want Native Americans and African Americans competing for resources. They want us separated, isolated, weak. But when we unite, we are unstoppable. When Black Lives Matter protesters stood with indigenous water protectors at Standing Rock in 2016, that was Hayes Pond solidarity. When Native activists showed up at George Floyd protests in 2020, that was Hayes Pond solidarity. When African Americans speak out against deportations of undocumented immigrants, that is Hayes Pond solidarity. Your enemy's enemy is your friend. The system that oppresses Black people is the same system that oppresses Native people. The police brutality killing Black folks is connected to the pipeline companies destroying Native land. The poverty in Black neighborhoods is connected to the poverty on reservations. We face the same enemy. We need each other. Hayes Pond proved it. 500 Lumbee stood up to the Klan that terrorized Black communities. They did not have to. The Klan rally was about intimidating Indians, but the Lumbee knew. They knew that if the Klan won, Black folks would suffer too. They knew that white supremacy targets all of us. They knew that resistance had to be collective. That is the lesson for today. We cannot fight alone. We cannot let them divide us. We have to show up for each other. Black people at indigenous rights rallies. Native people at Black Lives Matter protests. Latino communities and Asian communities. And all of us together saying no. Not in our cities. Not in our country. Not anymore. Now let me connect Hayes Pond to the gun rights conversation, because this is where it gets really important and really uncomfortable for some people. The Lumbee used guns. They carried rifles and shotguns legally. They used their Second Amendment rights to protect their community. And it worked. In 2020 and 2021 and 2022, more. Black Americans bought guns than ever before in American history. Gun ownership in Black communities skyrocketed. Why? Because people watched George Floyd get murdered. They watched Breonna Taylor get killed in her own home. They watched Ahmaud Arbery get hunted down and shot while jogging, and they decided they would not be defenseless. Groups like the National African American Gun Association have exploded in membership. Black gun clubs are forming across the country. People are getting training, getting permits, buying firearms legally. And some people are very uncomfortable with that. Some people say, black folks should not be armed. Some people say it is too dangerous. Some people say it will lead to more violence. Those same people never say that about white gun owners. Those same people never worry when white militias show up armed to protests. But when black and brown people exercise the same constitutional rights, suddenly it is a problem. Hayes Pond destroys that argument. The Lumbee were armed, 500 people with guns. And how many people died? 0? Not 1. Because armed people are not automatically violent. Armed communities are not automatically dangerous. What matters is intent. What matters is discipline. What matters is purpose. The Lumbee did not go to Hayes Pond to murder Klansmen. They went to defend their community. They fired warning shots. They made a show of force. And when the Klan ran, they let them go. That is responsible gun ownership. That is what armed self-defense looks like when it is done right. And it is constitutional. The Second Amendment exists, whether you like guns or not, whether you are comfortable with them or not. The right to bear arms is in the Constitution. And that right does not only belong to white people, it belongs to everyone, including the people most targeted by violence. So when you see news stories about rising gun ownership in black communities, remember Hayes Pond. Remember that your ancestors and your allies knew how to arm themselves responsibly. Remember that self-defense is not aggression. Remember that protecting your family is not a crime. Finally, let me connect Hayes Pond to the current fights over history education. Right now, across America, there is a coordinated effort to ban the teaching of accurate history. They call it stopping critical race theory, even though most of them cannot define what that is. What they really mean is stopping the teaching of racism, stopping the truth about slavery and segregation and ongoing oppression. They are banning books about Ruby Bridges, about Martin Luther King Jr., about the Tulsa Massacre, about Japanese internment, about Native American genocide. They want your children to grow up ignorant. They want the next generation to never know what their ancestors endured. They want to erase history so it can be repeated. And guess what story they definitely do not want taught? Hayes Pond. Because Hayes Pond teaches all the wrong lessons according to them. It teaches that oppressed people can fight back. It teaches that armed resistance works. It teaches that you do not have to wait for permission to defend yourself. It teaches that communities of color are not helpless victims. It teaches solidarity across racial lines. Every single one of those lessons is dangerous to the people who want to maintain the current system. Every single one of those lessons empowers people they want to keep powerless. So they erase it. They ban it. They make sure it is never taught. But you know now. And you can teach your children. You can tell your friends. You can share this story. You can make sure Hayes Pond is not forgotten again. You can be the keeper of this history. You can pass it down. Because they can ban books, but they cannot ban conversations. They can control curriculum, but they cannot control what you teach at your dinner table. Hayes Pond is not the past. It is the present. It is the blueprint. It is the proof. It is the answer to everyone who says organizing does not work. To everyone who says armed self-defense is immoral. To everyone who says resistance is futile. To everyone who says you should just wait and trust the system. Hayes Pond says no. Hayes Pond says organize. Hayes Pond says arm yourselves legally if you choose. Hayes Pond says show up in numbers. Hayes Pond says Confront terror directly. Hayes Pond says you can win. And you can win without becoming the monster you are fighting. That is why this story matters today. That is why 1958 is relevant in 2025. That is why you needed to know this. Because the fight is not over. The enemy is still here. And the tactics that worked then will work now. We just have to have the courage to use them. Now I need you to understand something about yourself. Something they have tried very hard to make you forget. Something Hayes Pond proves beyond any doubt. You are not a victim. You are not helpless. You are not weak. You are a descendant of warriors. You are an heir to a legacy of resistance. You carry power in your blood. They teach you a version of history where your ancestors just endured, just suffered, just waited for white people to eventually decide to be nicer. They teach you that your people survived through patience and faith and nothing else. They teach you that resistance was rare, that fighting back was wrong, that the moral high ground means accepting abuse without response. That is a lie designed to keep you passive, designed to make you think you have no options, designed to convince you that the only thing you can do is wait and hope and pray that someday things will get better on their own. But history tells a different story. The real history. The hidden history. The history of Hayes Pond and Robert Williams and the Deacons and the Panthers and countless other moments of resistance that got erased. Your people fought back. Your allies fought back. And they won. Not every time. Not easily. But they won more often than you were taught. And every single victory, every single moment of successful resistance was hidden from you on purpose. The Lumbee at Hayes Pond were not special in the sense of being superhuman. They were farmers, factory workers, veterans, mothers, fathers, regular people living regular lives. They were not trained soldiers. They were not professional organizers. They were just people who decided they would not accept terror anymore. That is all it took. A decision, a commitment, a willingness to stand up. And in one night, they changed history. They humiliated the Klan. They protected their community. They inspired people across the country. They proved what is possible when everyday people refuse to be victims. You have that same capacity. You have that same power. You have that same choice. Think about who you really are. Not the version of yourself they want you to be. Not the powerless patient waiting for change version. But the real you. The you that carries centuries of survival in your DNA. The you that is here because your ancestors endured Middle Passage, endured slavery, endured Jim Crow, endured lynching and redlining and mass incarceration and police brutality. You are here because they survived all of that. You carry their strength. You inherit their resilience. You possess their fire. The Lumbee understood this. They knew they came from people who had survived genocide. They knew their ancestors had fought colonizers. They knew they were not weak. They knew fear was a weapon used against them, and they chose to reject it. They chose to be dangerous to their enemies instead of afraid of them. And that choice changed everything. You have the same choice. You can accept the narrative of helplessness. You can believe you are powerless. You can wait for someone else to save you. Or you can remember Hayes Pond. You can remember that 500 regular people with no official backing and no institutional support defeated the most feared terrorist organization in America. You can remember that they did it with organization and courage and numbers. You can remember that they did it without anyone dying. You can remember that it worked. And then you can ask yourself if they could do that in 1958 with far fewer resources and far more risk. What can I do in 2025 if they could organize their entire community in a few hours, with no internet and no social media, what can I do with instant communication? If they could stand up to the Klan when the government would not protect them, what can I do when I know the system will not protect me either? The answer is everything. You can do everything. You can organize your neighborhood. You can form community defense networks. You can show up in numbers at city council meetings and school board hearings and protests. You can protect each other. You can teach your children this history. You can refuse to let them erase your legacy again. You can be the next generation of people they will try to forget. The ones who stood up when it mattered. Now let me speak to the spiritual piece of this. Because I know many of you watching this are people of faith. You believe in God. You go to church. You pray. You read scripture. And you have been taught that turning the other cheek is the only Christian response to violence. You have been taught that Jesus was non-violent, and therefore you must be too. You have been taught that fighting back is sinful. But let me tell you what else Scripture says. Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 14. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Fight for your family. That is biblical. That is not only permitted, it is commanded. Exodus chapter 22 verse 2. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. Self-defense is biblical. Protecting your home is righteous. God does not require you to be defenseless. Jesus told his disciples in Luke chapter 22 verse 36, "If you do not have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one." Jesus told his followers to arm themselves. Yes, he also preached peace. Yes, he also taught mercy. But he understood that sometimes in this broken world, the righteous must be prepared to defend themselves and others. The Lumbee at Hayes Pond, many of them were Christians. They prayed before they went. They asked God for protection and for justice, and God answered. Not one person died that night. Not one. Out of 500 Lumbee and 50 Klansmen and all those guns, not one death. That is not luck. That is providence. That is God protecting those whose cause is just. You have a divine mandate to resist evil. You have a spiritual duty to protect the vulnerable. You have a God-given right to defend your family and your community. That is not revenge. That is not hate. That is justice. That is righteousness. That is what God calls his people to do. So when you think about Hayes Pond, when you consider what those 500 Lumbee did understand, that they were not acting outside of faith. They were acting in faith. They trusted God, and they picked up their rifles. They prayed, and they organized. They believed in divine protection, and they also prepared human defense. That is biblical faith. That is real faith. Faith that acts. Faith that moves. Faith that refuses to let evil win unopposed. You are called to the same thing. You are called to pray and organize. You are called to trust God and defend your community. You are called to have faith and take action. Those things are not opposites. They are partners. They work together. Moses did not just pray for freedom and wait in Egypt. He led his people out. David did not just trust God and ignore Goliath. He picked up stones and fought. Esther did not just have faith and stay silent. She risked her life to save her people. Your ancestors understood this. They prayed in those slave quarters, and they also ran toward freedom. They sang hymns in those churches, and they also organized resistance. They believed God would deliver them, and they also picked up weapons when they had to. That is your inheritance. That is your legacy. Faith that fights. Hope that acts. Trust that does not wait passively for rescue, but partners with God to create change. You are not here by accident. Your survival is not random. You are alive because God has a purpose for you. You are here because there is work to be done. You are here because this generation needs people who will stand like the Lumbee stood, who will organize, who will resist, who will refuse to let evil go unchallenged. That is your calling. That is your mission. That is your divine appointment. And Hayes Pond is proof that when you answer that call, when you walk in obedience to God's command to fight for your people, He goes with you. He protects you. He gives you victory. So walk in that truth. Walk in that power. Walk in that purpose. You are not weak. You are not helpless. You are not alone. You are a warrior in the army of the righteous. You are a defender of your people. You are an heir to Hayes Pond and Monroe and the Deacons and the Panthers and every moment of resistance that they tried to hide from you. Remember who you are. Remember what you carry. Remember what is possible. And then go do what needs to be done, because the world is not going to change while you wait for permission. It is going to change when you decide to change it, just like Hayes Pond. Just like January 18th, 1958. Just like 500 people who changed history in one night. Listen carefully, because this is important. If what you just learned shocked you, if you had never heard about Hayes Pond before this video, I need you to do something right now. Comment the word truth below. Just that one word. Truth. Let me know this story hit you. Let me know you are awake now. Let me know you understand why they hid this from you. And if you are tired of the lies, if you are done with the sanitized history, if you are ready to know the real story of resistance and power and victory, hit that like button. Because every like tells YouTube that this video matters. Every like pushes this story to more people. Every like is an act of resistance against the algorithm that tries to bury truth. Share this video. Send it to your family. Send it to your friends. Send it to that uncle who thinks people back in the day just accepted oppression. Send it to that cousin who thinks fighting back never works. Send it to your children who are learning fake history in school. Send it to everyone who needs to know that Hayes Pond happened, that it worked, that 500 regular people defeated the Klan in one night without anyone dying, because they are counting on you not sharing this. They are counting on this video getting lost in the flood of content. They are counting on you watching and forgetting and moving on. Do not let them win. Do not let Hayes Pond get buried again. You are the keeper of this history now. You are responsible for making sure it spreads. You are the one who decides if the next generation knows these names. Simeon Oxendine, Charlie Wariax, James Catfish Cole, Robert F. Williams, the Deacons for Defense. All of them. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and state in the comments. Let us build a community. Let us see how far this truth is spreading. From California to New York. From Texas to Michigan. From small towns to big cities. Let us know we are not alone. Let us see that people everywhere are waking up to this hidden history. Are there stories like Hayes Pond from your area that got buried? Do you know of local resistance that never made it into the textbooks? Share it in the comments. Let us learn from each other. Let us build a collective memory that they cannot erase. Let us document the victories they tried to hide. Now keep watching, because we are not done yet. There are more truths you need to hear. There are more connections you need to understand. There are more ways this history impacts your life right now today. Stay with me. Do not click away. Do not let distraction win. What I'm about to tell you next connects all of this to the fights happening in 2025 and shows you exactly what you can do starting tomorrow. But before we get there, I need to tell you something about this channel. This is not just one video. This is not just one story. We are exposing hundreds of buried histories, hundreds of hidden victories, hundreds of names they erased and events they suppressed, and truths they do not want you knowing. Hayes Pond is one, but there are so many more. Robert F. Williams and Monroe, the Deacons for Defense in Louisiana, the Battle of Liberty Place, the Colfax Massacre and how they lied about it, Black Wall Street and the 35 other black economic centers they destroyed, Rosewood, Florida, Elaine, Arkansas, Wilmington, North Carolina. The list goes on and on and on, and we are bringing every single one of these stories to light. We are digging up the graves they tried to hide. We are speaking the names they wanted forgotten. We are teaching the history they banned from schools. This is not entertainment. This is not just content. This is a mission. This is a movement. This is the reclamation of stolen memory. Subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And then hit the notification bell so you do not miss a single video. Because if you found Hayes Pond powerful, if you are angry that you never learned this before, there are dozens more stories just as important waiting for you. And YouTube's algorithm is not going to show them to you unless you subscribe and engage. They do not want these videos going viral. They do not want millions of people learning that organized resistance works. They do not want you armed with knowledge of what your ancestors achieved. So the algorithm will try to bury these videos. But you can beat it. Subscribe, like, comment, share. That is how we win in the digital age. That is how truth spreads faster than lies. Tell your children this story. Sit them down tonight. Tell them about Hayes Pond. Tell them about the Lumbee. Tell them that 500 everyday people defeated the Ku Klux Klan. Tell them nobody died. Tell them it worked. Tell them that resistance is not futile. Tell them that organizing is powerful. Tell them that they come from warriors, not victims. Do not let your kids grow up thinking their ancestors just waited quietly for white people to grant them rights. Do not let them believe that suffering peacefully is the only moral option. Do not let them think they are powerless. Teach them the truth. Teach them Hayes Pond. Teach them Robert Williams. Teach them the Deacons. Teach them the Panthers. Give them the real history. Give them the empowering history. Give them the history that makes them dangerous to the system. Go to your local library tomorrow. Ask if they have books on Hayes Pond. Ask if they have books on armed resistance in the civil rights movement. Ask if they have books on the Lumbee. If they do not request them, demand they be added to the collection. Make noise. Make sure these stories are available. Make sure the next kid doing a history project can find the truth. Call your school board. Ask why Hayes Pond is not in the curriculum. Ask why Robert Williams is not taught. Ask why the Deacons for Defense are left out. Demand that accurate history be taught. Demand that resistance be acknowledged. Demand that your children learn what really happened. Be loud. Be persistent. Be impossible to ignore. That is how curriculum changes. When parents demand it, write to your representatives, state and federal. Demand that funding be allocated for preserving this history. Demand that monuments be built to honor these resistors. Demand that their names be memorialized. Demand reparations not just for slavery, but for every massacre, every land theft, every wealth destruction that came after. Demand justice. Demand acknowledgement. Demand what is owed. This is not just about history. This is about right now. This is about the future. This is about what kind of world we leave for the next generation. Do we leave them a world where Hayes Pond is forgotten, where they do not know their own power, where they think resistance is futile? Or do we leave them a world where these stories are common knowledge, where every child grows up knowing that their people fought and won. Where organizing and defending community is seen as normal and necessary and heroic. That choice is yours. That choice is now. That choice is made by what you do in the next 5 minutes after this video ends. Do you share it or scroll past it? Do you tell someone or keep it to yourself? Do you let Hayes Pond be buried again? Or do you make sure it spreads? You decide. Right now. What are you going to do? Let us pray. Bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, we come before you with grateful hearts and open eyes. We thank you for preserving the story of Hayes Pond. We thank you for the courage of 500 Lumbee people who stood against terror on January 18th, 1958. We thank you that not a single life was lost that night. That is your mercy. That is your protection. That is your hand moving in history. We lift up the names of Simeon Oxendine and Charlie Wariax and all the Lumbee warriors whose names we do not know. We honor their memory. We celebrate their victory. We claim their legacy as our inheritance, We lift up Robert F. Williams, who defended Monroe when no one else would. We lift up the Deacons for Defense, who saved lives in Louisiana and Mississippi. We lift up the Black Panthers, who fed children and protected communities. We lift up every person of color, who ever picked up a weapon to defend themselves and their families against hate. We say their sacrifices were not in vain. Their courage will not be forgotten. Father, forgive us for forgetting. Forgive us for accepting the lies they taught us. Forgive us for believing we are powerless when you made us mighty. Forgive us for waiting when you called us to act. Forgive us for staying silent when you called us to speak truth. Open our eyes to see ourselves as you see us. Warriors, overcomers, victors, not victims. Give us courage like the Lumbee had. Give us unity across black and brown and red communities. Give us wisdom to organize. Give us discipline to defend without becoming the evil we fight. Give us strength to stand when it is dangerous. Give us faith to believe that you go with us into every battle. Protect those who resist oppression today. Bless those who organize their communities. Guard those who speak truth to power. Vindicate those who have been erased from history. Restore what was stolen. Heal what was broken. Raise up a generation that knows their history and claims their power. Lord, we pray for awakening. Wake up your people. Shake them from passivity. Remind them who they are. Remind them what their ancestors survived. Remind them that survival is not enough. That we are called to thrive. Called to resist. Called to build. Called to reclaim what was taken. We pray for the children, for the next generation, that they would grow up in knowing these stories, knowing Hayes Pond, knowing that their people are warriors, knowing that organizing works, knowing that they are not alone, knowing that you are with them. Build them into a generation that will not bow, that will not accept injustice, that will not stay silent, that will change the world. And Lord, we thank you that we are still here, after everything they did to us, after slavery and lynching and massacres and theft and lies and erasure. We are still here. We are still standing. We are still fighting. We are still winning. That is not luck. That is your promise. That is your faithfulness. We are still here because you are not done with us yet. So use us. Use our voices. Use our hands. Use our stories. Use our rage. Use our hope. Use everything we are for your purposes. Let justice roll down like waters. Let righteousness flow like a mighty stream. Let the truth be told until everyone knows it. Let the buried be raised. Let the forgotten be remembered. Let the silenced be heard in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, who overturned tables in the temple, who stood against the powerful, who died and rose again, and gave us victory over every enemy, including fear and death itself, we pray. Amen. Now hear this truth. Walk in power. Walk in courage. Walk in the knowledge of who you are and whose you are. You are descendants of Hayes Pond. You are heirs to a legacy of resistance and victory. You are warriors of faith. You are the generation that will not forget. You are the ones who will pass this truth down until it can never be buried again. They tried to erase Hayes Pond. They failed. Because you know now, and you will tell others, and they will tell others. And the truth will spread like fire until everyone knows that 500 Lumbee people defeated the Ku Klux Klan on a cold January night in 1958. Until everyone knows that organized resistance works. Until everyone knows that we have always fought back. Until everyone knows that we are not powerless. We never were. Remember this story. Honor these names. Claim this legacy. Organize your community. Defend your people. Stand against terror. Build the world you want to see. Do not wait for permission. Do not ask for approval. Do not accept fear. Just stand. Just fight. Just win. Like Hayes Pond. Like January 18th, 1958. Like 500 people who changed history in one night. Walk in truth. Resist with courage. Build with hope. You are free. You are powerful. You are victorious. This is your story. This is your history. This is your birthright. Claim it. Until next time, remember, resist, reclaim. This is your inheritance. Walk in it. Amen.